Welcome to Security Watch. This is Zain. Today the topic of our show is Iran and the Middle East. To discuss Iran and the Middle East security dynamics, we have with us today Chairman Stand Up America US Foundation, Major General Paul Vallely, a US Army retired military general. The other guest today to discuss this topic with us is Dr. Athar Javed. Dr. Athar Javed is a senior geopolitical analyst and also a prominent academic. Welcome to our show, General. This is Zain Khan. It is a pleasure having you on Security Watch.
Thank you, Zain. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Security Watch, Dr. Athar Javed. It is a pleasure having you on Security Watch, as always.
Thank you, Zain, very much.
General Paul Vallely, I want to get to the first question. The termination of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, it gives Iran more space to develop, don't you think? What, in your opinion, should be the best strategy to deal with Iran's nuclear program? What do you have to say about that?
Well, of course, we've been following that nuclear development program for years. We've watched the co-development of a nuclear capability, an ICBM, a rocket-launched nuclear weapon that they have worked with North Korea throughout this whole program, where North Korea didn't conduct a nuclear test, without having an Iranian delegation there, and vice versa. But Iran at this time, they have developed a rocket system, a guidance system. We know from some sources they already probably have a nuclear warhead already. I think our CIA was wrong saying they wouldn't have a nuclear capability for a long time. I think they have the nuclear capability now. And if you look at a rocket or an ICBM, you've got the rocket part, you've got the telemetry, you've got the guidance system, and all you have to do is screw on the top is a low-level or a low-yield nuclear weapon, and then launch it from a container ship or launch it from a truck. And I know they've worked on delivery systems with the Russians as well. So to me, they have a capability, but Israel's watching very carefully. The United States satellites and our intelligence gathering information. So we're watching North Korea just as we are Iran, and trying to ensure there's no provocative moves against any other Middle East country. And I think basically, the doctor can correct me if I'm wrong, Israel has been bombing a lot of Iranian installations in Syria. And from what I heard, Iran is pulling back from Syria a great deal, but I don't have a lot of information on that.
Dr. Athar Javed, would you like to add something? Because General Paul Vallely just pointed out something very important.
Yeah, I think actually the issue in Syria, basically, as we all know, that there were other actors involved like Russia, Iran, and Iran had this tendency since 2003 when it post-Iraq, post-Saddam Iraq, basically, Iran, as we all know, the policies afterwards, after President Bush, the policies were changed actually to dramatically quite different, and that harmed the Middle East policy of the United States during previous administrations. The reason being that whereas one needs to engage Iran positively, there has to be a blueprint of engagement. And that blueprint engagement definitely should include the stability program, one. Two, it cannot, Iran cannot be allowed basically to destabilize the region. And by this I mean is that, you know, in Syria, on the ground, of course, there were so many groups fighting with each other, but the support which was provided in Iraq and in Syria mostly was coming from Iran. By the same time, as we all know, that there has to be a way to protect U.S. Regional interest and security interest, the strategic assets, which definitely involve other Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, and like many other countries which are in line with the U.S. foreign policy and the defense policies for the Middle East. So I would agree with you on this one, that Iran has withdrawn substantially from Syria. But as I said to you, that the policies in the previous administration were dramatically changed. That did affect, that created an inconsistency. So there is a need basically to reframe the policy in order to, whereas to provide security to your allies in the country, in Middle East region, but also to establish new channels of communication. That's what I would say.
General Paul Vallely, US, America, Israel, and other Western countries allege Iran of conducting a proxy warfare. How would you analyze the consequences of these ongoing tensions? What's your take on that?
Well, the IRGC, Revolutionary Guard, the main force behind supporting international terrorism, is the main arm of the Iranian government to influence operations, whether it's in North Africa, Yemen, or the Middle East. But I look at it, Doctor, as a chessboard. And you have all of these major players in the Middle East, and you have the sub-players. You have Turkey now with its own ambitions and its own goals. You have then the Russian involvement. You have the United States still with forces to a limited degree in Iraq, and some of our special ops still working up in the northeast Syrian area, but very limited. Then you have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel, and so and then you have Hezbollah, you have Lebanon. So when you look at that chessboard, it's pretty tough to figure out how to play it correctly, and I think that's why we have the frustration and anxiety of when I spoke in Moscow a few years ago. The theme was what next in the Middle East, and here it is 2020, and I'm still as the same question: what's the future? What's going to happen in the Middle East? Trying to figure out the chessboard and how you deal with Iran, the Iran Revolutionary Guard, how you deal with Hezbollah. I'm not sure I have any good answers right now. I'm sure the doctor would have a better solution than I have, but it's bizarre with this chessboard over there, and it has been for years. And you know, I was a guy, I thought going into Iraq, replacing Saddam Hussein was a misguided strategy by the United States and President Bush. We basically set on fire the Middle East by doing that. And
I totally agree with you on this one, actually. I think this is what you refer to. The chessboard was set wrongfully in 2003 March, and prior to that, the bad intelligence actually, or the bad consultation with the other parties, they gave the wrong information, and that created that chessboard you are referred to, the complex chessboard, whereas you give carte blanche to the major players in the region, which basically overtook. Because Saddam's Iraq was definitely using, all those humanitarian issues were there. There were other issues, major security issues. Mm. But one thing was there, that the influence, the regional influence was very limited. Now what we see is absolutely a consortium of non-state actors, like the Daesh and others. And then there are sectarian violence been mounting, which was never existed before. And that is a serious thing. Basically, that is now challenging US policy, because US had a very good control both over Gulf, Middle East. Middle East, when I'm saying, is involving also the Israeli-Palestine conflict. We had something to offer at that time. Now in this current scenario, I would say, we have nothing to offer basically, because first you have to stabilize Iraq, Syria, and Libya, and then going back to Middle East initiative, which was, if you remember, Middle East initiative was launched in 2003-4. You know, that we call the New Middle East Initiative, in which including Oslo Accord and the settlements issue, the refugee issues between Palestine and Israelis. But I think at the moment, as you said, pointed out very rightfully, I would say, that the complex chessboard has caused this one single point, caused this issue, that it was bad intelligence provided. And it was actually, at that time, I was teaching at the University of Copenhagen. I was dealing with this issue. And I wrote a paper on that, saying that this looks to me bad. It was December 2002. So we were basically dealing with that. This is bad. US should not do it. But then, as you said yourself, it was a bad initiative.
General Vallely, please quickly comment on what Dr. Athar just said.
Well, it was a false scenario. Now, we knew we knew Saddam had some chemical and biological weapons because he used them on his own people. He had just started a very basic nuclear development program, but from intelligence, we knew between, I think, January and March the 10th of 2003, that they, in fact, those inventories of chemical and bio were moved to two depositories in Syria and one in the Valley. The Russians assisted on that. We had good intelligence on that. So it was a false premise to say we're going in and attack Saddam and Iraq based on weapons of mass destruction. It was absolutely a wrong scenario.
Wrong. Yes, yes, Will.
Iraq was never a threat to the United States.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah,
and if you remember Dr. Kelly, one of the scientists from the British who later committed suicide, if you remember, he basically said in a deposition that this is false. Please don't do that, because he was a scientist. He was not actually a strategist or military, leader. But I think, to be honest, I think your argument exactly the answer to today's complexity.
Dr. Athar Javed, would you like to ask any question to General Paul Vallely?
What is the way forward? And then just a small from me, I mean, as a colleague of yours. So
what's the question again?
What's the way forward from this complexity?
Oh, I see, yeah. What next in the Middle East? Well, somehow the Iranian situation's got to turn to a more positive situation. You've got Israel, they're looking at annexation now of parts of the West Bank. You have sort of a consortium of Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States looking very intently on any future threats from Iran. We do have a president that's firmly in charge. He never agreed for that Iraq war and what Bush did. President Trump was always against that. So his motivation right now is to, looking to the future, is to get our troops out of the Middle East. Let the Middle East countries work together to solve the situation, and that's what must be done. I don't think there's ever been a grand meeting of the various parties in the Middle East sitting at the same table when you include Turkey, Iran, Syria, Israel, for example. Keeping the United States basically out of it, but looking at solutions as the Middle East sees it. My long-term career in intelligence, I learned very early on, and the United States hasn't done this very well. You have to look through the eyes, for example, of what the Turks are doing. Why are they doing? You have to look through the eyes of the Iranians, the Russians, and so on. And when you take positions like we have in our State Department of looking just what America sees, you have to put your eyes inside of the other people. What are their motivations? Now you can come up with some solutions. But if you try to hard drive your solutions without considering that, then you're going to get nowhere. So I would like to see a Middle East conference develop to come together. I don't think the United States has to be there. I don't think Russia needs to be there, but Turkey needs to be there, Syria, Iran, and see if you can come up with some solutions. I don't know how easy it is to work with the Ayatollahs. They're very set in their mind of what their vision is, and they want to have as much control over the Middle East as they can. Turkey has a lot of ambitions. They're now down into Libya? The Turks have put some forces, I guess, in Libya, from what I hear. So I look at that as the way forward, if that makes sense.
General, we read a lot of papers which write that Iran has an expansionist policy. What's your analysis on the subject?
Well, I think they have been expansionists since 1979. They've been expansionist into a number of countries. Most recently, they've been heavily involved in Yemen. They've been heavily involved with Hezbollah out of Beirut, using proxy forces. And the Iranians are very good. You notice they usually don't use their forces too much, though they did in Syria with the IRGC. but they use mercenaries, as we'll call them. And so when you look at Hezbollah, Hamas, they've been heavily involved in influence in the Gaza, or well, in the Gaza area, with Israel and even some extent the West Bank. So yes, they're expansionists. I still feel they want to be the major power and driver in the Middle East. So now you have a conflict between Turkey and Iran vying for power. But the less the parties like Russia and America stay out of it, let the Middle East. The Middle East has a lot of brilliant people, a lot of brilliant scholars. They understand what needs to be done. It all comes back in some way to oil and energy, but the United States is energy self-sufficient now. We don't need the Middle East oil like we did. And so those dynamics have changed quite a bit, but I'm not sure Iran is on any expansionist road right now. They've been down that road as they've tried to influence the Middle East. So I'm not sure what the Ayatollah's motivations are right now, other than to stay in power.
Dr. Athar Javed, would you like to add something quickly?
No, there will be very quick comments. One is that I think it's a great idea to engage Iran, and as you said, all-inclusive Middle East initiative to reconfigure the peace efforts. This is one very important point. But I would also say that my humble submission is that completely the United States out of this would again may infer or refer to the points that like replay of something of early 2000, because whereas there is a solid evidence that they can sort their things with each other at the GCC platform or others. But I still think that the presence of the United States within in the parameters of diplomatic or the security paradigm, I think it is important the US should remain as part of the solution and encourage them to engage Iran positively, so we understand where the situation lies with, as you said, with the current Iranian regime, and also to nullify that the US is trying to, upset or remove the regime. So I think that would be a good idea, actually. It's a very good initiative.
General Vallely, do you see any possibility of a limited or full-scale war between the US and Iran?
Well, I think there may be limited engagements. I don't see a major war at all. I think Iran is too smart to try to go to war with the United States and then the power that Israel has. But what I see as far as the United States involvement, if our fleets, which we have an aircraft carrier group in and out of the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf, President Trump will not tolerate any attacks on our ships in international waters. And our commanders out there, they've been given guidance. If they even attempt to attack one of our ships, they will be destroyed. And I think the Ayatollahs have heard that loud and clear. You're dealing with a different president than you have been dealing with Bush and with Obama. And our president does not want to engage in warfare. He really doesn't. We don't want to see, and let me put this out, I don't want to see another American killed in the Middle East, all right? I don't want to see another body bag coming back. We've been in Afghanistan since 2001. I mean, that's ridiculous. We should have turned that war over to General Dostrum after we took out the Taliban in basically 31 days of 2001. We should have turned it over to the Afghans at that time and say, okay, it's yours. We'll be here to help you. But what did we do? We flushed units in there. We flushed trying to do nation building, enter democracy into a very archaic, old political situation in Afghanistan.
But I think I would appreciate the President Trump's current initiative in Afghanistan, if I may say so, Zain, that the President current initiative in Afghanistan is extraordinary, fulfilling, and it's serving exactly what you have said. It is engaged Pakistan facilitated, and there are great chances that this thing will be over before elections. The withdrawal will complete, and the intra-Afghan dialogue will take place. I think this is a very positive point which you raised.
General Paul Vallely, as Dr. Athar Javed just mentioned the Afghan peace process, what's your analysis on the current Afghan peace process under the Trump administration? How do you see it? What's happening?
Well, his objective is to withdraw our forces out of Afghanistan. That's his primary objective. Now, that does not mean with our forces that we have in various places in the Middle East that we can't reinforce or come to the aid of the Afghan government. We can still do that. We have a great capability in the Middle East. We have many, with our aircraft carrier groups, air bases. We can launch from a number of different places to assist the Afghans. So I think that's the approach that the president is taking. Also, I've said this for a long time, we should have engaged India to a greater degree of influence over there. Because of the constant friction between Pakistan and India. Now you have a big confrontation going on between China and India.
So that's what my next point was, because traditionally India's policies in Afghanistan has been Pakistan centric, and that has been a problem because that affects. So that's why I would say, instead of involving India, if you involve China, they can help the development and all these work, roadside, bridges, dams. So, and Pakistan has no objection on that. And also, one can use Chinese, infrastructure programs to build and rebuild Afghanistan to save U.S. taxpayers money. Because whenever you bring India in, basically it becomes U.S. Pakistan centric, and the actual goal of peace objective of the U.S. get lost in the translation. So that's my humble submission, actually.
General Paul Vallely, when do we see the U.S. forces out of Afghanistan, and do you like Trump's strategy in Afghanistan?
Well, I think the objective is to get them out by the end of this year, because we have the major election, in November of this year. I don't like to look through a political prism to solve things. I like to look at what I call the reality prism, which I engaged General al-Sisi in Egypt when I was there. We both agreed you have to look through a reality prism rather than a political prism to solve things. If you look through a political prism, you never get anything solved. And I think that's the way President Trump is looking at it. But we're battling an insurrection and a civil war in America right now, which is the priority. And to overcome that, and then the election here in another 5 or 6 months, and so I don't think any major decisions will be made before then, other than trying to withdraw the forces out of Afghanistan and coming up with a fix. Now, China, as you know, has built new airfields in Pakistan, a new road from West China down through Pakistan to the Indian Ocean. That's never been before, but that's all part of that Silk Belt Initiative. Then to extend, like you said, over into Afghanistan makes a lot of sense. The Chinese want to invest their money in Afghanistan, that's fine. I have no problem with that. And that's part of their Silk Belt, even going to North Africa. So the Chinese are very busy, but with the coronavirus, that set the whole world back for 90 to 120 days now. Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
General Vallely, as we all know that Iran is a regional player in the Middle East, the current tensions can cause more instability in the Gulf region. What new alliances are needed to stabilize the wider Eastern region, and what are your solutions?
I don't know who Iran is going to end up being aligned with. There's certainly a friction between Turkey and Iran. You still have Assad, in Damascus. They're trying to rebuild Syria. I think they'll continue their alignment with Hezbollah in Lebanon, their extension down into Yemen. So they're going to still be fairly active over in that area. But I don't know how you engage the Ayatollahs. They seem to have a very strict way of doing things, and it's their way or the highway, as we say. But how agreeable is Iran to trying to bring the forces together over there? and influence that. I don't see any initiatives by Iran at all trying to take any peaceful solution to bring the other countries in the Middle East together. That's what we want. Iran has a responsibility, but if their motivation is to be the power in the Middle East and to dominate, then it's not going to work. They're going to continue to be a threat to everybody over there.
Dr. Athar Javed, please shed some light on the very same question that I just asked General Paul Vallely.
I think let me go back to what General said earlier, that let's give a Middle East big conference, let them sit down together, resolve the issue of these support to Houthis in Yemen, and try to sort out the differences which can cause a wider damage to the US interests in the region. Because one way or the other, Saudi Arabia and other countries, UAE, Qatar, they are allies, of course, to United States. But Qatar, in one angle, had been, not at the moment, had been allied to Iran as well. So if we look into this, that if we can have this situation stable, we can, encourage allies of the United States to take initiative, but behind that supporting that whichever solution they consider for the region at the moment. Because after all, you said two important points. The priority of the President Trump is to withdraw troops and we don't want to see any more body bag coming to US. The second is that the election year, of course, election year doesn't mean that you do not solve the issues on the ground, but any threats can be neutralized if we engage them, allow them to sit together and resolve the issues. So my intake would be what you said already, because this is a very substantial argument that whereas you have to go look through the prism of the countries, that what they're facing on the ground, because at times the countries use, maybe Iran or other countries may use US as a very big enemy to achieve their regional interest or, get more space in the region, like in Iraq or in Syria. But if US, allows the other countries to sit together and remain at the backseat and watch over it, I think this will help. This is my suggestion, because it is the suggestion. Yeah, it is a suggestion relating to the current security situation. Secondly, it won't cost United States a lot of money. It won't cost these soldiers. It has to have a local solution, strengthening the GCC platform, all inclusive. This is what I would suggest.
Any comments on this, General Vallely?
Yeah, I would just add to what I said previously, and I just thought of that this morning as we're talking here today. I want to see the Ayatollahs. I want to see Iran come up with some solutions, not negative things, by expansionists and opportunities in that in the middle. Let's put it on the Ayatollahs. What do you want? Positively, how will you help the other countries in the Middle East solve the problem? I don't think anybody's ever asked the Ayatollahs to do this. It's their responsibility as well to come up with solutions. But I haven't seen anything coming out of Tehran which is positive and trying to solve problems other than supporting these different groups that they support throughout the Middle East. So maybe that's one of the things. A conference, get together and get Iran to speak. What do you want? What are your objectives? How can you positively change the Middle East without attacking other countries or putting in your IRG forces and so on? So that maybe is the way forward.
Dr. Athar Javed, Pakistan is currently conducting intelligence-based operations on its border with Iran. Do you think that the terrorists that use Iran's border to penetrate into Pakistani territory are in Iran's knowledge? Iran knows of it? And how is Pakistan dealing with the situation?
I think I would not say, because I'm not privy to the information for the first question. It would be misleading if I say mischaracterization. What I do understand is that Pakistan, in its fight against the terrorists, local terrorists and the foreign sponsored terrorists, whoever coming from Afghanistan or Iran or wherever from, they actually are carrying out intelligence-based operations because there were soldiers killed while they were patrolling a couple of times, and 10 soldiers in few weeks back. And before there was a bus was attacked coming with the soldiers. And our other, the Shia the population of Hazara, they're also being attacked. We do not know. We want the Pakistani government at the moment, I think they want to understand that what is the situation. So the first thing they should have done, I think as a student of political science, I would suggest that they should fence properly so nobody should coming across, or they should investigate and ask all the relevant governments, including Iran, that they must take it very seriously, because as General said, that it has to be asked to Iran basically. Ayatollahs, that what is their positive way forward. So I think but at the same time, there is a collaboration and, exchange of and agreements between Pakistan and Iran, being a neighboring country, to deal the situation through dialogue. And also Pakistan would continue to neutralize any foreign sponsored or local terrorist organization, because they understood in these 20 years or so, they have lost thousands of soldiers and $120 billion or so, according to Pakistani government's data. They have lost civilians around 100,000. So I think they will not take chances. They will definitely go after any of the organization if they try to destabilize Balochistan. What I would say that the Pakistan and Iran also has come very long way, because there was a sectarian element into that. I think it is. I have to acknowledge this because I watched it over a number of years. It has substantially improved now. We have less sectarian killing as we had before. And there is a chance that Iran emulates that model to the Middle East as well, as you were talking, that have less, and if countries cooperate, they would have less sectarian killing. So the focus would come back to the peace and stability instead of, hunting each other. That's what I would say. So in that way, it's a very positive development, because the Iranians have taken some initiative, which is in that way in reference to Pakistan. In that way, that's good. That's what I would say. Thank you.
General Paul Vallely, would you like to add something?
Well, too, we have to understand, a lot of people don't know of the different ethnic cultural groups within Iran. You got the Baluchis, Azerbaijanis. 20% of the population, I think, is Arab. And then the Persians are actually the smallest. The pure Persians are the smallest part of the population.
Very small, very small.
Very small, and they're mostly in the Tehran area. But it's been such a tyrannical government against its own people that there is a movement, Doctor, I'll share with you, called Cyrus Force, from Cyrus the Great. It's called Cyrus Force Iran. You can Google it, or I can send you information on it. But it's looking forward, if the Ayatollahs fail, and if there is some kind of a movement by the Iranian people to bring down the regime, then Cyrus Force is looking to the future of that, not to create a regime change, because the people in Iran would have to do that, but actually, what's a free and democratic Iran look like? They've even developed, Doctor, a constitution for a new Iran. That's Cyrus Force. I can send that to you if I get your email contact. So Iran...
Please do. I will also send you. Yeah, please.
Okay, good. I'll get you through Zain, or I'll give you my email, but we'll share some of that. But so there are activities going on in Europe and the United States and within Iran, looking to a free democratic government at some point in time. Because the Arabs, which control that south, I guess would be the southwest portion of Iran, where the oil is, that's mostly Arabic, which they are saddled right next to Iraq, for example, in that area. So internally, Iran's not that strong as you might think right now from the information I'm getting. And they're firmly in control of any riots, the amount of people that they have killed inside Iran. Then you got another group that wants to take over called the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the MEK. They're based out of a place north of Paris. But they don't have the full support inside Iran that they think. But this Cyrus Force initiative that President Trump has been made aware of is a real thing that could occur if, in fact, the Ayatollahs fall at some point in time.
General Paul Vallely, any last comments on the topic so we wrap it up?
Well, I think we have to look again to the future of the Middle East, what needs to be done, how we do it. The engagement is absolutely critical. I think maybe we should do another session, maybe in a few weeks again, see where we're at on everything. And I'd be happy to come back on with the doctor. And the doctor's going to invite me to Copenhagen so we can have a nice discussion there.
Absolutely. We would love to, definitely. You're most
Yeah,
welcome. I can also invite you to Islamabad anytime.
That would be good. That would be excellent.
Thank you so much, Major General Paul Vallely, for being on Security Watch. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Zain.
Thank you so much, Dr. Athar Javed, for being on Security Watch. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Zain, for inviting. Thank you very much.
This was Major General Paul Vallely, the chairman of Stand Up America US Foundation, and also Dr. Athar Javed, the senior geopolitical analyst and an academic. We were discussing the topic of Iran and the Middle East. Until the next episode of Security Watch, this is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.